Just need to vent as writing here is more cathartic than talking to a therapist. My ex and I used to live in an upscale part of SoCal that has its fair share of wannabe Real Housewives or even Stepford wives. I generally avoided the type, however my ex met some women through a charity auction and she started spending a lot more time with them. I couldn't stand them due to their greed and vanity, but I tried to play the role of dutiful husband, and to make her happy, I started integrating myself into the group of husbands married to these trollops. I found 2 or 3 of them were guys with whom I had something in common, and we would have fun telling stories about our younger days over a cocktail or a barbecue. We ended up going on a number of trips to Europe, Hawaii and Mexico with some of these couples before COVID. Sometimes we would stay local and rent out a block of rooms at a beach hotel for an easy staycation. Once some of the restrictions were lifted during COVID, we immediately booked a block of rooms at this hotel and celebrated our freedom. We had such a great time that we promised each other that we would go back annually and revisit that memory, which we did twice more. 2 years ago my ex had a midlife crisis and decided to buy a classic car that she'd always wanted growing up. It barely ran, but she joined a car club where the car owners would meet on Saturday mornings for coffee, then they would drive their cars in a parade to a different location. Since I'm not a car guy and didn't want to spend my weekends talking to mechanics figuring out how to keep an old car running, I told her that it was a hobby that we weren't going to share. I knew it was just going to be a money pit that made no sense to me, especially since our kids were about to head off to college, but I didn't draw a line in the sand as it was her dream car, so I supported the dream. Unfortunately, she went ahead and bought the car, then started plowing thousands of dollars in upgrades and maintenance into the car to keep it running. I saw the bills and paid them, but she told me that she was getting great deals on parts and labor due to referrals from her car club, especially one guy, we will call him Carlos, that she said adopted her into the club. After a few months of car club weekends, I realized that she was arriving home later and later on her Saturdays, while her phone behavior also changed. Up until that point we had an open phone policy, but one day I tried to take a phone with her phone, but she had changed her password. Her excuse was that another of the wives was having problems with her husband and my ex was providing confidential advice that my ex didn't want me seeing in case I talked to him. Her behavior also changed with me, where she became irritable with everything I did and would passively aggressively compare me to the other husbands, especially if they were having a better year financially than myself, as their businesses were less impacted by COVID than mine. We had been through down cycles in our relationship before. We had both cheated early in our marriage, but with counseling had worked through it and had forgiven each other 20 years before, but the combination red flags were next level. I decided to start snooping. The next Friday night I planted a GPS tracker on her car. Next morning after she left for car club, I logged into our family plan and started looking at her phone and text activity. Lo and behold, there was a new phone number that was spiking activity. I paid for a name lookup service and found Carlos' full name and home address. I had some lunch, then watched the GPS on her car drive to Carlos' house, where she spent the afternoon fucking her new boyfriend. I debated about confronting her when she got home, but instead I played sick and moved into a different bedroom, noting I didn't want to infect her with my virus. She shrugged and didn't say a word, which said volumes. I started separating money and went full gray rocker for the last few months, opting to wait for our last child to leave the nest for college. She did come into my room a few times for sex. For some reason I decided that I was only going to have anal with her thereafter, probably because anal wasn't her favorite, but she would usually orgasm more intensely from the experience, so she never complained. Aftercare was always awkward, as she would usually just get up and head back to her room, probably enjoying the thrill of having cum in various orifices from her husband and her boyfriend. Once our last child was settled into his dorm at college and we got back home, I sat her down and told her I knew she had a boyfriend and that I would be filing for divorce. She was in shock and denied it, but I just gave her Carlos' address and the GPS log of time spent at that location, and her face went pale. She stammered and explained that she would park at his house and then they would walk to a coffee shop a mile away for exercise. I told her to stop making excuses and to just own up to it, but instead she decided to blame me. She turned the tables on me and started telling me that if she did cheat, then she had a good reason to cheat, because I wasn't as good as a provider as the other husbands in the group, and that if we divorced, all of the women in the group would force their husbands to ghost me, leaving me friendless. I called her bluff, believing that some of the guys actually had balls and would be there for me. Later that day I moved out and then filed for divorce the following week. I settled into my new apartment and reached out to a couple of the guys in the group that I was close to. They were initially sympathetic, but as she predicted, within 2 weeks I had been completely shut out of my friend group, as the men lived in fear of their wives. She bought me out of the house and we settled the divorce relatively quickly. We managed to spend a Christmas together with our kids that first year. I stopped following social media of my former friends as they were dead to me and decided to start rebuilding my life from scratch. I started an exercise and diet routine that transformed me back into my college body, while I reconnected with old friends and started making new ones. I have dated a few nice ladies and have had some memorable one-night stands, but haven't yet met anyone that I'm going to settle down with anytime soon. We split the kids over the holidays this year and it went smoothly. My eldest son came home from college over Easter break to visit his girlfriend. He spent Easter with my ex. It isn't a big holiday for me, and the next day he told me that my ex had introduced her new boyfriend to him, and amazingly enough, it was Carlos. I assumed she had been sneaking around with him due to her wanting to maintain appearances of not being a cheating whore, but I guess she decided that a year was enough to make it official. I wasn't surprised by it, but curiosity got the best of me last night because I realized that our annual staycation at the beach was this past week. I logged on to social media last night and found a picture wall from one of the women that hadn't blocked me. Sure enough, the entire group of couples was at the hotel, and my ex and Carlos were featured in the middle with her showing off her new engagement ring in the photos. I have done a lot of work over the last 2 years in processing the end of my relationship, but I have to admit, seeing him living my life with my ex and my friends was a punch in the gut. Not a knockout blow, mind you, but it was enough of a trigger to let me know that I still have a little work left to be done before I've healed completely. Update: ex-wife cheated 2 years ago, still denies his existence. So I've posted my story about how my ex-wife met a guy through a car club while we were married. She proceeded to have a full affair with him. I figured it out using phone records and GPS in her car and realized she was hiding his existence entirely from me. I waited a few months until the day after we dropped our last child at college, then confronted her. She denied it and I moved out and got divorced. He's younger, so I know she's since been losing weight via Ozempic and posting about her wellness journey since I moved out. Have largely been no contact except for divorce and discussions regarding our children. One of our kids had a graduation last week and we had to attend the same ceremony and celebrations. I vowed to be kind and grey rock her while outwardly posing to be the happy former couple who get along. For some reason we ended up sitting next to each other during the walkthrough ceremony and had an hour to kill before the activities started. She started asking personal questions about my life, which I largely evaded. It's important to note that over Easter break she introduced her affair partner to our children. They told me about him and asked if I knew about him, which I answered yes without providing more information to them. Since we had time to kill, I asked if my ex was happy with her boyfriend. She immediately went into a long denial about their relationship and said he was just a friend. I laughed and pointed out that she had been dating him for more than 2 years at this point, and if I was him I would be pissed at not being called a boyfriend. She started getting emotional and choked up and said she had a lot of regrets about the choices she made and doesn't like how life turned out. I asked her to be specific about what choices she regretted making, but she went quiet. I ended the conversation feeling pity for her. She's been living a lie for so long that she literally has no concept of the truth of our demise, nor will she take any responsibility for her role in same. I drove home feeling like a winner for the first time in this whole situation. It gets better. Comments: Environmental C123, tell your kids about her affair. They are old enough now. If I was in your shoes, I would just tell them that I need to be honest with you. This was the reason for the divorce and I am telling you only now because I wanted you not to be negatively affected while you were still living in your home. She is still your mother and I am still your father, but she is no longer the woman I fell in love and got married with. I will always love you and you will always be my top priority in life, but I have to set the record clear in order to move on with my life. Let them decide how to move things forward with your ex. This is good. We're doing some time together on a trip in 3 weeks. Good time to drop that bomb on them. C_manufacturer 1536, soon she will actually regret her actions and try to come back. Stay strong and let her deal with her own fucked up life. Wellman 81, a classic case of where the cheater finds out the grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence. Her response to the question about her relationship with the AP is code for the new war off and he's not what I thought he was. And you know what? Tough shit. She deserves every bit of humiliation and disappointment that comes her way. She threw away a marriage over a stupid fantasy and now she regrets it because reality set in. Too bad. Do not under any circumstances take her back after their relationship ends up in the toilet. She chose this sleazeball over you, she can deal with it. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Caught my girlfriend cheating with my coworker in our house, so I locked them naked in the basement and had her brother discover them. I had just returned home from one of my night 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shifts at the hospital. And my head ached slightly due to the long sleepless night I had. I had worked more because a coworker had called in just in the nick of time to report his unavailability for the night shift, and that left us short a pair of hands. I had just one thing on my mind that day, and that was to sleep all day. The only problem with that plan was that I had promised to go with Nora, my girlfriend, to see how her aunt was doing. Her aunt had been diagnosed with cancer and was receiving treatment at home. Nora went to see her most of the time, and when necessary, they came to the hospital where I worked. I felt it affected Nora's mental health, since that was her favorite aunt, and she was the closest to her aside from her aunt's visiting maid. So, whenever she requested, I let her have some space. She'd tell me she wanted some nights to herself to clear her head, and I would willingly oblige. Sometimes 4 nights a week. During those moments, we wouldn't call each other's line because what's the point of staying away from each other only to spend time on the phone? Although it really wasn't helping our relationship by shutting down communications, I had no other option. Since Nora's sleep always seemed disturbed by my arrival at a few minutes past 6 in the morning, I had taken one of the keys to the back door from its bunch which lay on the kitchen counter. This was to let me slip into the house and not disturb her sleep. For the record, I live in a housing estate, with no fence and all that. Just the lawns around the building and the asphalt roads separate one building from another on all four sides. I parked in the front driveway since my garage and basement were about to undergo construction. As I walked to the back of the building, I was urged to notice that a car had driven right into the lawn behind the house. I wondered how anyone on earth could be so insensitive to veer off the tarred driveway right into the grass and even up close to the building. First I inserted the key into the lock and turned, but it wouldn't budge. This only indicated that there was another key in the keyhole on the other side. It was strange we hardly ever used the back door. If there's a key on the other side, it's possible the door is open, I said to myself to my surprise as I pulled the handle. The door went wide open. Why would Nora want to take the back door for any reason? I heard myself asking. Could there have been a visitor? The only person I knew who might stop by was her brother Drake. He worked with a civil construction firm and he was the one who I contracted to a super cement, but Drake wouldn't drive up my backyard, let alone get into we house through the back door. I shook it off my mind and silently closed the door so as not to awaken Nora, who definitely would be sleeping by that time. But I was in for another surprise. By muscle memory, I picked a strong familiar scent in the kitchen. It was the cologne of someone I knew, Frank, my coworker who had been absent. The scents got stronger as I made my way through to the staircase and eventually upstairs. But it had to be my mind playing a trick on me. It was practically impossible for Frank to be at my house while we were supposed to be at work together. It was impossible. He was a good guy and I knew his girlfriend. In fact, he had only been to my house once before and that was ever a year ago. I also was not sure if he was really close enough to Nora to want to stop by my house. And if there was an emergency, I knew who Nora would call. Yes, they had met a few times when Nora brought her aunt to the hospital, but that was normal. I imagined for the first time in my life that Nora could be cheating on me, but I quickly shook off the thoughts. As I made my way to the bedroom door, all I wanted to do was sneak into bed and have a full day off. But as I got closer, I could hear the water running in the bathroom. Nora was bathing. Nothing too strange, but wasn't it too early for that? At least for the Nora I knew. I knew she'd be surprised to see me in the bedroom because I had a tradition of buzzing the front doorbell while she trudged her way downstairs, heavy with sleep, to get the door. While a part of me wanted to sink into bed and knock it off, I knew I had to first get my scrubbing clothes into the washing machine. I grabbed an extra towel and made for the guest bathroom at the other end of the corridor since the washing machine was there too. But something besides the washing machine got my attention. It was a pair of boxers which weren't mine. For a moment I freaked out. I never wore that pair of boxers, never. I tried to calm my head and ignore the glaring facts that were staring at me in the face. Nora had finished in the bathroom and must have heard my footsteps walking across the corridor because soon the bedroom door flew open and she stood with her towel wrapped around her body. "Sebastian," she cried, "how and when did you come home?" "Through the chimney," I said, faking a smile but burning with a billion questions inside. Questions that needed immediate answers. Questions that would save or destroy our relationship. "Wait a second, honey, who owns this?" I asked casually, raising the boxers for her to see. I noticed her gasp in shock as she struggled to put her thoughts together. This was when I knew I had lost the relationship. I'd never felt the kind of heartbreak I felt in that minute since my life began. "Oh, those," she said, I guess they belong to Drake?" "Drake? Yeah, he was here last night to check out the basement and all that. And I think he must have forgotten it after he had a shower." "Oh, that's fine," I said, trying to make the moment easier for her. I quickly turned and got into the bathroom and turned on the shower even before I took off my clothes. Everything was wrong with the answer she had given. Everything. For Drake was much bigger than the slim pair of boxers I held. He also couldn't have come back to inspect the basement because he did that while I was at home during the day yesterday. And I personally dropped him off before going to work. And finally, the scent of the cologne on that pair of boxers was strong and unmistakable. Somehow in the midst of it all, I chuckled. Could this have been the reason why he called in absent? Could this have been why Nora was always taking some days and nights off for her alone time? For how long had I been played on? By that time I was done. I decided I was going to walk away from her, but not without letting her have her teachable moments. That moment, thankfully, came within the week. A few days later, I woke up at night with a horrible feeling. My instincts might not always be right, but that night I knew beyond all doubt that something was wrong. I couldn't tell what it was. I checked the time and it was 4 a.m. I just had this horrible feeling of everything not being all right. Nora was not on the bed and she wasn't in the bathroom either. But her phone was on the pillow. She never went anywhere without it. So, why now? I picked up her phone but it was locked. After serious brainstorming, I figured out the passcode. To say the least, I was baffled by the chat which was left on the screen. It was with the contact saved as Mom. I decided to follow through. My heart raced as I saw firsthand the depth of foolery I was in. I typed out the contact on my phone and before I could complete it, Frank's name came up. I checked again, and it matched. I got to the bottom of the conversation but could not believe what I saw. I quietly walked downstairs and went towards the basements. Sure enough, as I approached, I could hear coming from the basement quiet moans of Nora and a masculine voice, as well as the accompanying sounds which proved what they were doing. I burned with such anger I'd never felt before. Standing in the shadows of the entrance door, I watched in pain as I was betrayed by the closest people in my life. They were too busy to see me, but their clothes were out the door. Then a thought occurred to me. I quietly shut the door, which happened to be the only entrance from inside, and locked it. Picking up their clothes, I headed into my room, took a brief shower, and left for work earlier than normal. I also found Frank's phone in his pants pocket and took it with me to work. Then I called Drake, Nora's brother. "Hey, Drake," I said, "do you think you and your team could start the job in the basement this morning?" "Yeah, sure," he said. I was feeling super restless, and sure enough, Frank did not report for duty. How could he? He was stuck in my basement. 2 hours later I got the call I was anticipating. Nora's brother called me and sounded like he was hyperventilating. He and his team had found stark naked Nora and Frank in the basement trying to take cover from him and the team behind a beam. I listened silently as he kept going on about what a hoe his sister was and how embarrassed he was made out to be in front of his team, who were all local men who knew him and his family dearly. I could hear Nora frantically crying out about something in the background. He started apologizing profusely to me and said that he and his guys kicked butt-naked Frank out into the street. The aftermath was spectacular. Butt-naked Frank was arrested for public flashing, as one of my neighbors reported him. He also made it to the local news. My coworkers and I watched him and his naked arse get arrested on breaking news on our TV. Needless to say, he was indefinitely suspended from work. As for Nora, well, my Bill's Good team made sure the word spread around the town like wildfire. The scrutiny was so much, I heard she quit her job and became a shut-in at her parents' place for months to follow. What happened afterward? I have no idea. Maybe she's still living in her parents' basement and screwing dudes secretly. Somehow my coworkers were able to put two and two together and were extremely sympathetic to me, which felt nice. I took a few days off and packed all of Nora's stuff and called Bill to ask her to pick them up. One day when I returned home, her stuff was gone. She never attempted to contact me ever again. And like that, she was gone from my life. And I wish I could say I cared, but I didn't. There was just so much more to look forward to in life.